What's going on YouTube? Thanks for tuning into the channel. Welcome to Oh So Simplified, where I simplify life for you because life should be simple, but simple don't mean easy. Let me jump right into this. So this is the top 7 books. 7-ish, there's kind of extras added in there, but top 7 books for your 20s is how I'm naming it. Definitely the books that basically have helped me a lot. The books I always go back to, at least 6 of them. Number 7 is kind of like a bonus book that helped me a lot early on, but it's not something I necessarily go back to. But I'll kind of just start from the top. I'll start with the best one, just so you get the best. If you watch this part of the video, if you watch the whole thing, you get to see all of it. But we'll start with number 1, which is Mastery, my favorite book of all time by my favorite author of all time, Robert Greene. And ultimately, Mastery is about how to become great at something. At any field, it's really applicable to anything, but just goes through masters of the past, masters of the modern day, people like Leonardo da Vinci, Benjamin Franklin, Temple Grandin, Yoki Matsuoka, Michael Faraday. A lot of these names you probably don't know, but the Wright brothers. But basically, he goes through a lot of these different masters, and what he defines as mastery as this point at which you have so much knowledge and so much understanding and also so much experience mixed with your own personal creativity and inclinations that you're able to make connections and in whatever field it is provide novel discoveries or accomplishments or things that make you kind of somebody to be looked at for years to come. The purpose of the book, from where he was writing it, is in this day and age, we kind of, I feel like, are getting very away from that. We're kind of in a microwave society where things like hard work and working for things don't make sense. More people are interested in, somebody that's 22 that, made millions of dollars off prank videos or OnlyFans, as opposed to somebody that actually spent, 10 years, 15 years of actually developing their craft and becoming something great and doing something that isn't just replicable by any just random person. It's something that only somebody that put in that amount of time and that amount of effort could ever accomplish. It's also his idea of how you can live the good life. Like, you can get a lot of fleeting positive things, such as, it could be money, it could be, things, people, it could be sex, it could be anything like that. But you can get those types of pleasures, but the deep pleasure that you can really get is by really becoming great at something. And being able to do it, having that ability and being able to offer something to the world. That's kind of his main thesis of the book. The reason why I really like it is it gives you kind of a guiding principle of how to decide on careers in your life, decide on what you want to be, and also live a life that you don't end up at 50, 60 years old and look back and think, this is not the life I want to live. Following false paths and things like that are integral pieces of the book. I do have a breakdown I did a few years back. If you want to look back on my channel, I'll probably do a deeper breakdown of all these books moving forward, but that one is definitely my favorite book. I always go back to it, and it really gives me kind of a sense of direction, and it's almost a reaffirmation because I've read it when I was like in my very early 20s, like 2022. Not the year, but like I was 20, between 20 and 22 is when I read it the first time. But essentially, I have been moving in that way, and it's interesting to look back on my life, how there is kind of this inner voice you have that you can either listen to or squash that can kind of direct you around in what you should be doing. So that's number 1. Number 2 is going to be The Courage to be Disliked. Now, I also really like the sequel to this, The Courage to be Happy, but because this list I'm only adding 7, I had to kind of cut it down, so we're just going to go with the first one. The Courage to be Disliked by, I think their name is Fumitake Koga and then Ichiro Kishimi are the 2 people. They're like Japanese. I've only really listened to this on audiobook form, but basically what this book is about is it's a psychology that is pretty counter to, especially if you live here on the West, and when I mean the West, I mean like US West, but even in England and stuff like that, pretty counter to the main philosophy and talking points of how you should be looking at the struggles of your life. Like, that's the biggest thing I'll say. So it's more of like guiding principles on how do you live your life as a human, kind of divorced of a spirituality component. So you can have whatever your religion, but this is more of like a philosophy, psychology type of way of life. And the main central tenet is that the only way you can actually be free is that you're disliked. That's the only way you know you're living your life, because that means that you're living your life based on something you want as opposed to what somebody else wants for you. Now the book gets a lot deeper, and the central tenets that I really get from it is around trauma. Now, in our day and age, the victim mindset, displaying your trauma, really talks about how trauma is looked at in our current society. And, in the Freudian view, which is the dominant view in the West, is that, based on what happened to you, that is why you are the way you are. Where in The Courage to Be Disliked, it's more about Adlerian psychology, and it more looks at, the way you are now is actually fulfilling some sort of goal. And if you want to change, you have to understand what goal you would ultimately want to fulfill and give up the goal that you're fulfilling now. And this can be, through anything. If you were, let's say, going for a job and were rejected from an interview, and now you're too scared to go, interview at other places, you might tell yourself in the Freudian view, I'm depressed because I was rejected and it hurt my feelings, and now I'm depressed and I can't get out. And that could be the Freudian way to explain it, which really gives you no solution. And the Adlerian way of viewing it would say the reason why you're not putting yourself out there anymore is because it's fulfilling the goal of not putting yourself out there, because you don't want to put yourself out there because you've convinced yourself you will be rejected, that there is nobody that would want to accept you, and you're very self-centered, and you're only looking at your insecurities and your issues instead of being outward towards the interpersonal relationship tasks that you have. Whereas you probably have something to offer to somebody, you just need to meet that person and then not think about how terrible you are and think about what you could actually offer this person, and you would move yourself forward, as opposed to saying, the reason I'm this way is because of what happened in the past. You're saying the reason I'm this way is because it's fulfilling a goal. I don't like the goal that I'm getting, so I'm going to choose a no goal, abandon this goal, and fulfill that goal. So that's kind of a very short synopsis of a lot of what it goes through. But what I really like about it is it's a philosophy book. It's not like a lot of these other kind of pie in the sky. I think it really breaks it down from like a logical angle. It's basically a debate between a philosopher and a skeptical student, or if you will, and they kind of go back and forth, and I think it gives you a lot of guiding life principles to move forward through in life. So that's number 2. Going to number 3. Number 3 is going to bring back my boy Robert Greene with The Laws of Human Nature, which is basically a spin-off book of a chapter in Mastery. There's a section in Mastery called Social Intelligence. He got a lot of feedback about this going back, so he basically wrote a book about the laws of human nature to kind of explain this social intelligence. And essentially what the laws of human nature is very much what it sounds like. It's going to kind of break down ways of looking at society, looking at how people work in intimate connections as well, or dyadic, or let me not use jargon, like one-on-one type of conversations, as opposed to group and organizational thinking and things of that. But it really gives you a very big scope of how the interpersonal realm goes. And if you go back to the number 2 book, The Courage to Be Disliked, the main tenets in the book are that like all of your problems come from interpersonal relationship problems, because we're a social animal. And The Laws of Human Nature kind of says a very similar thing and kind of goes through how we work as a social animal, and probably breaks down a lot of your preconceived notions of how things work and why things work. And also just kind of a background on me. I have a major in interpersonal communication from Rutgers University, and reading mostly Mastery, but reading this book and different books from Robert Greene, it was very interesting bringing some of his thoughts into class, because I think he actually does almost a deeper, more honest dive than a lot of my university level communications classes do, because they don't really talk about the negative side from a it is what it is perspective. It's more of like, it just comes from a more positive and, palatable from like perspective, where he really goes into like the dark side of things, how things really work. From his perspective, a lot of it isn't like scientifically proven, but I found a lot of use from it. I think that, all problems are really interpersonal relationship problems for humans, since we are that social animal, and understanding that social realm. This book is a great book to kind of take you through that. And it's also, Robert Greene has a very interesting writing style that is not really imitated, definitely not duplicated, and I really definitely enjoy that. So that was number 3. Let's move to number 4, which is Evolve Your Brain. Another book which I do like some of the other books. I like Changing the Habit of Being Yourself by Joe Dispenza as well, but we had to pick one to make it into the list. So Evolve Your Brain. This is more of a book about manifestation and meditation. It's basically how, your thoughts are really shaping your world, and having the ability to, organize your thoughts, intentions, and the coherence of both to move towards what you want. And taking time out for yourself to really feel and think about what that's like, and take that into your everyday. Because when you think about things, even when I think about doing this, there is so much time that I think about making videos that I'm not making videos. There's so many videos I've shot that I've never posted, that I've never done anything. But it's like, why am I thinking about these things but not living in a congruent manner? And that's where he talks about the coherence aspect and the meditation aspect, and how you feeling like you have it before you actually want it. Now, a lot of this does sound pie in the sky. He attributes a lot of this to quantum physics and tries to get down to the scientific level of how all of this works. But if you really just think about it, even in a practical sense, I mean, I am Buddhist, so some of these do align with Buddhism thoughts in general. But what is meditation? What is, like, when I look at my house, like, all of this stuff we see around us is not really natural, like the roads, the sidewalk. It is coming from somebody's mind. Somebody sat down and thought and acted towards making it happen. So their thoughts actually became reality. So really, in a practical sense, you can do that. He gets a little bit even deeper, where you can really attract things, which I do agree as well. Like, our understanding of reality scientifically, like, we like to think that we understand so much, but we don't know what we don't know. And there's even things such as magnetism, which he kind of talks a lot about, that we really don't understand how magnetism works. Like, we've just really, I mean, in Mastery, talk about the discovery of magnetism with electromagnetism with Michael Faraday. But the idea of, and I want to keep it on the practical, the idea of attracting things to you. You can get into the quantum physics and the electromagnetism and magnetism of different people, and he talks about heart coherence. But the main thing that I think anybody can take from it is, taking time out to really organize your thoughts, getting away from everything that you have been told you are, really thinking about what you want, believing in what you want, feeling like what you want has already happened, and then getting up from that meditation and living as if that reality happened. There is only really one result that can come from that. Like, something similar to what you're thinking, feeling, and acting towards is going to happen. Like, there's almost not a way for that to happen. Like, if I'm dreaming, I mean, this is a simple thing of getting a pizza, and I'm going to the pizza place and doing things to go to the pizza place, like, I'm gonna get a pizza. And I also have that kind of confidence in myself that's like, there's nothing that I've spent time doing, thinking about, focusing on. And then where he'll get a little bit woo-woo, it depends on where you are, is that, like, cutting down that time. Because he's trying to say that you can actually, like, pull the freaking event towards you, so that you don't really have to do anything. Like, if you just get your mind, heart, and feelings directly towards that, it's like your emotions, he kind of explains it, is like a magnetic pull towards, like, what you want, and it'll make it come, like, really fast, so you don't actually even have to do the time. But even if you took the long road, if you keep that focus, you will get there eventually. So that is number 4. Number 5. Number 5 is going to be Sapiens. Now, this is probably the number 1 book that I read over the 2020s. Like, because all of these other books that I mentioned kind of came out before. But, or I think Sapiens came out before. But I listened to Sapiens during the pandemic. I listened to it so many different times. The reason why I would suggest this book is because of the way it talks about mass time. How long humans have been around. Like, humans, in this book, it's only talking about hundreds of thousands of years, but I'm like, I also minored in anthropology, so I took a lot of evolution courses, so I still follow it to this day. Like, they're finding that anatomically modern humans were here 1 million years ago. 1 million years ago. So if we've been here for 1 million years, what new has happened under the sun? Like, and there's also 70,000 years. He talks about the cognitive revolution, where basically anatomically modern human, there's tools, there's building, there's all these things 70,000 years ago that like show that we were operating very similar to how we were. And I think we think about our significance a little bit too much, that like, oh, we're such this advanced society, all these things are different and new, and laws of human nature gets into this too, but we're still like that same animal for 1 million years. We just have all of these conceptions and rules and belief systems that we built up that allow us to see this huge separation from other animals. And the book really comes down to like really describes a lot of myths that we have, how like, or what really makes sapiens different than other animals. It does talk about other humans, and I digress, like Neanderthals and stuff like that, and what happened to them. Probably killed them all off. That's the basic assertion of the book. But the mass time is the main thing, that we've been around for so long. And then there's, if you want to get into rabbit holes about like ancient civilizations and Atlantis and who built the pyramids, who built Stonehenge, who built a lot of these different places, we can go down there where it's like there was advanced societies even before this advanced society, but I digress. But how much of what you stress over, you think about, even me, I always talk about, like, I stress about things all the time that just are literally not actually real. Like, it's just a conception that people have made up that we abide by. If I lived in New York, you can get into a subway packed to the brim, packed like sardines, and generally nobody gets hurt, nothing bad happens, almost nobody talks. It's like everybody has a specific way of looking. Imagine if you took that many dogs and packed them in there. There'd be fights, there'd be attacks, there'd be different things. It's because they don't have the ability to just believe in things that don't exist, such as a commute, a job. The reason we're packed in here is just to go to a job. We get arrested if we attack each other. There is jail. There is, like, you know what I mean? All these thoughts and conceptions of what's going to happen and this is going to happen. It's like, that's really what makes us different. But the thing that I took about that really helps me move through my day-to-day life is how much of these things I believe in that aren't real and how little new is under the sun. We've been doing this over and over and over and over again. And what you take for granted as being like the right way to live, people have been arguing over different ways to live for millennia. And it's not going to change, and that's how it's going to be. Like, the right and the left arguing, you go back to 1600, there was the two sides arguing as well. But he does talk about some other things, but that's the main thing I took from it. It's a great book, and it's a book that really changed the way I viewed at the sapien animal, how humans are, or this particular set of humans, because we probably killed off all of the other humans, because there was a bunch. I digress. So that was number 5. Number 6, we're gonna go with Turning Pro by Steven Pressfield. So this is also another book that is taken from, well, this is actually this is another spin-off book, like, called Laws of Human Nature. It's a very short book. This book is probably what's getting me to do this video, that, you know, turning pro, moving from amateur to professional. So it's basically like, how do you do the things that he calls it resistance is holding you back from? He talks about this force. There's this force called resistance that when you wake up, it is always trying to like push you back, talk you out of what you know you need to do. You don't need a guru, you don't need a mentor, you don't need a drug, you don't need a this or a that. It's like you have this inner resistance that you have to fight every single day, and turning pro is the way that you beat resistance. And then the book Turning Pro is his kind of story about how he beat resistance, and also how you overcome resistance and how you move from the amateur to the professional. I think this is probably one of the best self-help books out there, just because it's short and sweet. It's also one of these books that's written in an extremely unique way, and it really just cuts out the noise. Like, there's not a lot of this, like, it's not a lot of fluff. Like, like a lot of people, if you don't know anything about the book industry, they write it to be a certain length just so they can sell it for $20, because a lot of people aren't going to buy a 30, 40, 50 page book for $20, because it's like, I'm not going to spend that much. So what they'll do is they have a book that they could write in 50 pages, but they'll extend it to 200 pages so that you can justify the cost. He didn't do that, so the book is also super cheap, but it's a super short book. I've only really listened to the audio. I like The War of Art as well, but Turning Pro is the main piece that if you're a person that's like, you know what you need to do, you have the knowledge, you have the knowledge, you know enough. You're just not doing it and doing it consistently. What you need to do is turn pro, and that's the book to read. Turning Pro by Steven Pressfield. The last book, last but not least, is, and it kind of is least, but is 10X by Grant Cardone. The reason I brought this book in is because it had a profound effect on me. I'm not a huge follower of Grant Cardone now. I've kind of just outgrown his style. Like, I'm not really interested in becoming exactly like him. I think he has great points, and I think that book 10X changed my life. It got me into sales. It got me my first six-figure year in sales by using his techniques. It got me a lot of recognition by the CEO. I was doing things that nobody would ever do. And that's really what 10X is about. The main thing that it teaches you too is your goal setting. So that's what I'm going to focus on. His main idea is that, like, generally when we set goals, we set them too low. And he basically says whatever your goal is, 10X that goal and make that your goal. And then what you do is whatever you think you need to do to reach that 10X goal, 10X that. Now, the multiplication itself is kind of like hard to do and quantify, but the main idea is still valid, and I agree with this wholeheartedly. His main idea is if you let's say you make $60,000 a year and you say I want to make $70,000 a year, the jump itself is not a huge jump, so it's attainable in your mind, but the amount of effort you need to do to make that jump, you also in your mind say is like not a lot of effort. So you're probably going to do something very similar to what you do now and not even reach the goal. And then if you have to put in more effort to reach that goal, you're going to give up, because it's like, is the juice really worth the squeeze? And then even the third one, let's say you hit the goal. What if it didn't even like solve the problem that you're going to do? So you're going to feel kind of just despondent, like what you do never solves your problem. Whereas if you went from 60 and said, my goal is to make 100,000 or 150,000, which isn't a 10X goal, but it, you know, it's like a double or like almost double goal, that you know you can't do what you need to do. You might have to think, I literally have to get a new job. So you're going to be making all these different actions, doing all of these different things. And one, let's say you make all those actions and you change and you find a place like has an 80 base and there's an incentive tied to it, you know, and let's say you don't even hit the incentive, you only made 80. That's better than your original goal of 70. You fell short on this goal, but we're still achieved more as a result. Number two, you know, you're going to be willing to put in more effort, because if you put in more effort, you're willing to put in more effort because you know the goal itself is so much larger than what you're at now, that you kind of expect to put in more effort. And it's also not going to give you the despondence of, like, in fighting, Chael Sonnen always says this phrase, and it's the truest phrase if you've ever been in a fight or wrestling, like anything that's like a one-on-one thing, especially one-on-one. It's like the worst thing to be in a fight is, one, he'll say being tired, but this is part of it, is like when you are fighting somebody and you thought it was going to be an easier time than it is, because that's going to make you double tired, because your expectation has been shattered. Like what you expected was lesser, and then now you're realizing like, oh, this isn't what I've been preparing for. So not only are you mentally getting tired, but the physical tired of it being harder than what you thought is affecting you. So you're like double tired from the issue. And that's something that I think that the 10x rule really gets at, is like, no. Increase the expectation of effort you need to put. And if you don't need to put that effort, well, good. It's the same thing that they say in fighting. It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And that idea is like really into 10x, that you should, overdo what you're doing. So even if you come up short, or even if that's not what you need to do, you're still in a good spot. So that's one that I haven't listened to that book in years, but I listened to that book so many times for a couple years in my earlier 20s, like around 24 to 26. I listened to that book hundreds of times, to the point where it's like there's certain sections where I can just recite the book because I've listened to it so many times. But it is kind of a traditional self-help book, and I know there's a lot of self-help books that are out there that are like, it sounds like the same thing. I would say the goal setting he has is the thing that makes it different. And if anybody talks about 10x goals and things like that, they kind of took it from him. He was the one that really created that. So that's really it for this one. I know it went on a little bit long, but wanted to get these books since I know it's hard to find what books to read. I mean, even at my point right now, I'm having a little bit of trouble because a lot of people make crappy books these days. People are trying to make money. These were the ones that really helped me through my 20s, and the ones I still kind of look back at in my early 30s right now. I'm going to be coming with more videos. If you like the content, like, comment, subscribe. If you didn't like it, put a dislike, leave some negative comments. Anything will do. And until next time, you know what it is. Peace.